At 7:30 on Thursday morning, I'm delighted to say Adrian is here. Adrian, good morning to you.
Morning, folks. Last week went so well, Ger.
Also back by popular demand. And Shane, how are you?
Morning. How's all?
I don't want to talk about Manchester United today, but Marcus Rashford is out. Are you going to finish in top four now, that Marcus Rashford? Because we've basically been a 1.5 man team. It's either been Casemiro or Rashford.
Yeah, you can't have them all at once, can you? I don't think it's that concerning. It seems that he's going to be back for the run into the season, which is crucial.
This is the run into the season.
I know, but Eriksen's back now as well, and yeah, it leaves a bit of a gap. But once Anthony Martial starts scoring goals
for you.
Once Anthony Martial starts scoring
and
goals.
the illustrious Wout Weghorst as well, of course, he can bang in the goals.
Yeah.
No, it's a concern. Of course, it's a concern. But yeah, Europa League's the focus. Evan Ferguson is the focus next weekend for Man United, of course. Brighton in the FA Cup semi-final at Wembley, so some big games coming up.
Weghorst, of course, going back to Burnley next season. You know, having not had to go down, he'll be able to go back and play directly in the Premier League with them. Hopefully that's not true, and actually they go for OTBAM instead. But Vincent Kompany might not be there. Vincent Kompany, like telling everybody, stop linking me with the Man City gig. Now they're linking him with the Spurs gig overnight.
There's no chance he takes that job.
Why not? It's a great job.
Yeah, but he's taking Burnley to the Premier League. I mean, if they didn't get promoted to the Premier League, then you might be saying, right, he wants a Premier League job at this stage. He might jump ship from.
Are you saying let's tease this out here? If you're his agent, you're like, I've got Spurs on the phone. He's like, no, I'm taking Burnley to the Premier League. Yeah, I gave them my word. I'm a man of my word.
He's lived so close to Manchester. Burnley is stone's throw for Manchester. He's lived in that area for how long now? Going down to London would be a.
I suspect he can have a nice gaff in London.
You could, of course.
And
culture shock, though.
If you're rich enough, they'll give you a driver.
Well,
somebody will drive the car down for you. You don't even have to drive it yourself.
It'd be odd timing for his career, is the thing, right? Like, he's doing a very good job at Burnley. Can he pick up that template and drop it in at Spurs? The only counterpoint to that I see is that, like, everybody knows that Tottenham's a basket case, so it's basically a shot to nothing. Like, he'd go in there and make a balls of it, and then in 6 months' time go, not my fault, as they all have done, every single one of them, and maybe legitimately.
Yeah. Who would take the Tottenham job realistically? You would take it for the money, of course, but
it's a brilliant job. What are you talking about? They've got one of the best, most profitable stadiums in world football. It's like London, so you can attract the best talent. They've got a track record of investing money. They just invested it badly in the last time. And they've been a Champions League team there or thereabouts over the last decade.
How many trophies has that talent got them, though?
The stadium is the thing that people always talk about. I could see the attraction of, we give you this nice shiny office and you can come in.
But the money the stadium generates is the thing.
I know, and the talent, I mean, they're maybe a layer below or a layer below that it attracts.
Dele Alli.
Yeah.
Hashtag wasted talent, maybe. There's plenty of that, Ger, to go around. I don't know. It's not going to be Kompany. You know, it's definitely not going to be Kompany.
I mean, I love your cocksuredness, but I've no idea where it's coming from. Are you both genuine? Sorry, okay. Do you really not think it's a good idea for Vincent Kompany to have taken Burnley as far as they can go? Because let's face it, you know, maybe he gets up and they stay one season and they're competitive and they finish between 8th and 16th. But then after that, they're going to be fighting relegation forever.
It'd be a typical Tottenham appointment, in the sense that, who the hell knows whether he's any good or not.
Yeah.
You know, Frank went down and lit the place up down there, and everybody was saying, well, this guy is going to be unbelievable. Look at the job he's doing at Derby, and it just hasn't.
Frank didn't light the place up, though.
Well, he did pretty. He left with an enhanced reputation, and that's why he was able to take.
I think there was a lot of evidence to suggest that, when we talked about Frank the other day, people were pointing out that, the team that he had 3 or 4 genuinely Premier League class players on loan. And Mason Mount was there for the season, a couple of others. And, they're clearly not championship players. I think he's done a good job. I think he's gone slowly about building it. He seems to have a specific style of play where the team are doing one specific thing week in, week out, as opposed to Frank with, mentality, don't make mistakes. So we're going to keep it tight, lads.
The one thing I would say about
remember when I played
back in my day, but the one thing I would say about Kompany is that there's a bang of Kevin McStay offense in Kompany. The team talk style. You see the behind the scenes in Roscommon years ago when McStay did that team talk at half time in the Connacht final, was it? And then was it all or nothing when you saw the behind the scenes with Kompany? I don't know if it was all or nothing, apologies, but their team talk style is very much similar when the team has the backs against the wall. So that's just something I noticed. But you'd certainly play for Kompany.
I see Brendan Rodgers here as I was just having a look at the odds. He's an ideal fit for them. He can go in there. It's a bit of a pretend club, Tottenham. Do you know what I mean? And he can go in there and pretend, like Brian Kerr would say, pretend with the best of them, and be trotted out every week to say that everything's fine. This club is a behemoth, and it's been run absolutely perfectly. Got great character, and I think that would be a good fit.
The Kerr quote, by the way, is, "I can spoof with the best of them." Are you calling Spurs a spoof club?
They are a bit, aren't they? They're a bit of a. They are in the sense of like European football. Just are clearly any success a little bit of a yo-yo.
Just want to, in the moment, distance myself from the notion that Spurs are a spoof club with the array of talent they have and the fact that they are consistently in the hunt for Champions League.
They just haven't managed to. I'm talking about them being a bit of a spoof club in the sense of not really achieving anything or not winning any trophies, right? And not really bringing in the best talent. They are a layer below that. They have obviously ambitions, and that's on one level very admirable, to pierce that bubble and make themselves a constant Champions League team, and a team that should be vying for the Champions League, a team that looked at one point as if they might be vying for the Premier League, but it's never really happened for them. That's the sort of club they are, which is fine. They're just not
They still might get top four.
0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Hello, Bobby Dwyer, specifically you this morning.
I'm not doing it to anger you, Bobby.
Leave a comment in the YouTube, youtube.com/off the ball. Here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock for you. We have Graham Hunter at 8, reflecting on last night's Champions League action, a 2-0 defeat for Chelsea at the hands of Real Madrid. DB is going to talk to us at 8:20. Vinnie Perth going to preview the weekend's League of Ireland action at 8:45. We have You Had to Be There with Keith Tracy, and we'll play some goodness from the football show last night as well. I may be delusional as a Burnley fan, says Nigel Gallagher, but I don't think he'll take the Spurs job. I think he has more awareness of his development as a coach. Maybe he thinks that there's a bigger job than the Spurs job that will come from overseeing Burnley's eventual relegation in 18 months. I don't know. I'm just not sure about that.
Well, he's the Man City manager in about 4 or 5 years, isn't he?
I don't Steven Gerrard's going to be the Liverpool manager, and blah blah blah. It's fated that this is going to happen. It's not. Nothing's fated in football, really. Pep might go at the end of this season. Pep might be there in 10 years because he's getting 20 million a year, and he's like, well, I'm still amazing myself with my own ability to pick 4 centre backs and turn them into the best defence I've ever had. I don't know.
Does the Arteta curve continue to go that way? History shows that that's not necessarily going to happen, and at some point or another, that's the way this thing works. That won't be enough for him to stink the joint out. He's been at Man City before. He knows the club. They're not his club, as Pep would tell you, but that's not beyond the bounds of possibility.
And I also think Steven Gerrard will be the Liverpool manager at some point. We forget very quickly. I'm talking 10 years' time, this man.
Not a hope.
I don't know.
Hope.
I don't think Steven Gerrard will still be a management.
Sorry, maybe if FSG no longer own it, anything could be possible. Somebody might.
He won't be the successor to Klopp, put it that way, but
somebody might put him in as a. Who won't be the successor? Oh, Gerrard. Gerrard's not going to get it. Some of the other stuff that's making the back page headlines, obviously, it's Karim Benzema scoring again. He only scores against the English teams. He's anti-English. He's anti-Brexit ever since Brexit. No, nothing to do with that. Turns out he just likes scoring goals. He's good at the old tap-ins, Karim Benzema, isn't he?
You have to be there. You
had
to be there.
Yeah. He's the boy. He's great to get himself in the position, Joe. I think that's the cliche that we use around these things.
Strikers don't get enough credit, by the way. Yeah, he had to make that movement to get there, do you know?
That little ball over the top last night, by the way, in the lead into that goal was off the charts.
Brilliant.
Probably didn't get enough love. Dave McIntyre in commentary was giving it an assist. It was that good, even though I think it was a pre-assist.
Yeah. Mane hit Sané after City lost. This is an incredible story. If only Colin was here. He loved his creative tension between Sadio Mane and Mo Salah, and reckons that Mo Salah's missing the creative tension. It turns out you could get a thump from Sadio Mane if you were, if you stepped out of line. And Leroy Sané found that to his cost, according to stories all over the media this morning. So apparently they were arguing on the pitch, and you could see that, and there are some pictures of it. But they continued arguing all the way through to the dressing room afterwards, and Mane thumped him.
Yeah, he hashtag doesn't seem like the type, does he, Sadio Mane? Do you know? He really doesn't.
After thumping someone in the head and leaving them with it. I saw the two of them getting on the bus. They were all very sheepish. There was a load of fans queued up to try and get autographs. And Sané came out and had the hat over his head and head down. And Mane was also a bit sheepish coming out.
I'd never obviously encourage violence in any sort, but sometimes that is what the teammates need. Do you know, the verbals sometimes don't sort it out. You're better off not separating them. Let them have it out and they'll say sorry in a few minutes.
I think we've moved past point where that is the thing anymore. Like, you know, the point where they would say, oh, it's great, you know, the training ground, Wayne Rooney having to like layering into somebody, that's exactly what you want. Like, it feels like in modern sport it's in the same bucket as the ranting and raving at half time.
Well, I don't know where it comes in relation to the Bowyer-Dyer scale. Like, what kind of a interaction was it? We don't get to see it on camera, so was it an absolute smack?
I think for a while? I think there was blood was drawn.
Serious enough.
Good comparison.
Is one of the reports. So, I mean, it's just interesting that he was blaming, Sané was blaming Mane, and Mane was not having it. It shows that they care. They care.
Liverpool fans would, like, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that he, for even outside of like punching a teammate, might have to leave the club because it's not working out for him. I was looking at his stats the other day and they're really, really poor. I'm not watching enough of that football, obviously, to know if there's a story beyond the stats, but I presume Liverpool fans would have him back tomorrow.
Ah, yeah. And with Firmino going at the end of the season as well. It's all the end of an era, lads.
No chance I want Kompany and Spurs, says Bobby Dwyer. Good morning to you, Bobby. Not proven in the Premier League and he'd be straight off to City at the first chance. Who would take the Spurs job? Outrageous statement. One of the biggest jobs in the Premier League. It is definitely one of the biggest jobs in the Premier League, and they also pay really, really well. So loads of people want the Spurs job because it's a great job. That's the to be factually correct about this. Big news coming out of the Dubs overnight. Well, apart from that's the headline here is James McCarthy was obviously out doing press yesterday, and he's making the point that well, it's above their pay grade for the players. Basically, the provincial championship doesn't make any sense. And I think it is interesting. I know you were sceptical about this in our pre-show meeting. I think it is interesting that the players are like, this doesn't make any sense. Because once that starts to happen, it seeps into the consciousness. You're reading Jim McGuinness and he's like, no, we can't get rid of this. Once you get rid of the history, you can't bring it back. It's like, yeah, great. We can't bring that back because it has literally been a blight on the GAA's calendar since it was invented.
Well, I think the point is that most weeks in the build-up to my own county's first involvement of the year in the Ulster Championship, I'm really excited. This week I couldn't care less. Like I will be in Haley Park and Oma on Sunday to watch Tyrone Monaghan. I'll be there.
Couldn't care less, but
I mean,
they lose.
It feels like the jeopardy just isn't the same. You know, in previous years you lose, you go into the first round of the qualifiers, which is a bit of a gargantuan task then to get through that, to get to an All-Ireland quarter-final or the Super 8s or whatever it was. But this year it feels like, well, if they lose to Tyrone, they've got the 5 weeks to recuperate for the group stage.
Just remind me about the Super 8s because I've kind of forgotten. Were there only 8 teams?
Only 8 teams. It was basically the All-Ireland quarter-final
There was
stage.
actually Super 8s.
Yeah,
there was
two groups of 4.
Right.
Yeah.
In which case there was some jeopardy to get into that because you were in the top 8. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we sure about that? Because it feels like, you know.
Yeah, you got through the qualifiers or else
some
you're
bad teams
winner.
managed to make it.
Yeah.
Whereas with this, it's like my super sweet 16 and then it's like my super sweet 12 a month later.
It's a new way of looking at it, right? And there is that bit of, like, there will be dead rubbers, as we've seen, that will crop up. Like, fair play to obviously what New York have done. If they end up in there, you would expect that there ends up in some dead rubbers in that group. Maybe they were talking about extending that group maybe even to 5. We should see how that plays out. But the point that I was making was provincial structure is not making sense, is the headline of the Star today. And maybe it needs to be death by 1,000 cuts with this thing.
That's unfortunately, like it could have been. They could have just ripped the band-aid off with Proposal B last year. I mean, let's go.
The last straw would be the players saying, that's it. We're not doing this crap.
I do think that Proposal B could have rescued the provincial championships because they would have put the provincial championships at the start of the year. Remember when like there's huge crowds at what's your local tournament in the pre-season tournament?
Dr. McKenna.
Dr. McKenna, not the O'Byrne, the Dr. McKenna. There's like huge crowds at that because there's this mad like pent up. Everybody wants to go and see the teams play, and if that was the Ulster Championship and it was run off over 3 or 4 weeks, I think you would be getting 10, 15,000 at those games. Instead, it's like now everybody's going, and there'll be big crowds because there's nothing else on for a few weeks.
But they tease us. They improve things year on year. Like they got rid of the universities from the McKenna Cup, for example, which was definitely a step in the right direction. But then it's such a slow process to make it interesting again. I think there is something in that. Maybe, I don't know. Do you put the top 2 teams in your province? Or say the top 4 teams in your province who finish in the league in the top 4 places, do you put them in the provincial semi-finals?
You get an awful lot of dross getting into, depending on the province, getting into a Leinster semi-final, let's say, or a Connacht.
Yeah, you might have Division 3 team
semi-final or final even.
When the players retire from playing county, says Michael, having a provincial medal is something they will be proud of. I mean, I suppose, but the players are proud of their Railway Cup medals. Like, that doesn't mean that we should still be persisting with the Railway Cup when it completely disappeared. I mean, look, they kind of screwed the provincials, the Railway Cup, by the time of year it was. But anyway,
But that's the league as well, so that gets replaced by a more competitive league that people are putting in more of a.
And everybody gets to improve collectively at the same, and you get to manage expenses, and you get full oversight, and there's like loads of different reasons, and there's loads more games, and you can develop a fan culture, which is actually one of the interesting things. I think I've begun to realise that we don't have a fan culture. We just have this kind of abuse. People just go because there's one game a year, and you go and you vent for that 60, 70, 80, 90 minutes, and then you go home and you're internet trolling the Leitrim players. Like, the Leitrim players getting abuse. The Leitrim County Board have issued a statement saying, what the hell is wrong with you? You were actually speaking to somebody close to the situation yesterday, Shane, and there's genuine anger about the fact that the Leitrim players have been attacked by faceless morons.
Well, a lot of people watching this morning will have seen or used Hogan Stand and those other forums, and you can have anonymous accounts, and it's similar to Twitter as well, the vitriol that's on there. The fact that people can hide behind accounts and criticise, or in many cases abuse amateur Gaelic footballers or hurlers, is actually remarkable. They wouldn't say that it's like, they wouldn't say it to any of them walking down Carrick-on-Shannon Main Street.
They absolutely wouldn't.
Like, not a chance. So the fact that they can hide behind and say these things, the Leitrim players weren't trying to lose to New York. And the point is, years ago Leitrim lost to London for the first time. They've lost to New York for the first time. These things happen, but those players had to go into their jobs on whatever it was, Tuesday morning, once they got back from New York, and face the music and get back into daily life. And the fact that they have to put up with this sort of crap,
irrespective of whether or not they're amateurs, right? Because I think that sometimes the amateur thing is used as like you actually can't have a proper analysis of the game because, you know, or if somebody if somebody sticks a finger in their eye, you can't I think just as like normal human beings should not be getting abused for anything, like by anonymous people online. You should not be able to say stuff anonymously online to people that you wouldn't say to their face.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that stuff that happens in the stands anyway, right? Like during a game. We've all been at the games. Like, you have to be, I don't know, at this day and age, that sort of stuff, it only gets worked out within the stands, within the grounds, by being policed culturally by other people who can go, listen, will you shut up? Like, that's absolutely OTT, particularly at GAA games where you end up having a lot of family and friends and stuff around. It's just the level of unawareness to do that now.
Why do you think that happens? So, Tommy's been talking a good bit on the football pod about trying to build a supporter culture in GAA. I think it's because the games, there's so many day trippers who go to just that game that they feel entitled to behave like that because there isn't a cultural policing, because there isn't a group of people who go to all the games and are like, no, that's not how you behave.
When I was at the league final, the Galway Mayo final, there was a few words used directed towards one Galway player in particular during the match that I was shocked by. I was literally sitting there going, I've been going to matches for years, and I was shocked at what he was called by a man who I would say was in his 60s.
A Galway fan?
It was a Mayo fan about Galway players.
Right.
And that's not to tar all Mayo fans with one brush, but it was disgusting. And I was like, this kid, you know, if it was a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old, you'd think, Jesus, they're going to grow up and eventually realise you can't say that. But this was a grown man, you know, and it was disgusting.
And was it policed?
No, not policed at all. And there was a lot of looks obviously thrown his direction, but and that's just one tiny little portion of Croke Park. You can imagine.
Well, that results in that does result. You're opening yourself up to, like, look, ultimately with stuff like the smoking ban and all that sort of stuff, they were successful because people were going, here, could you stop doing that? I'm not into it. And we all know that it's the same way if, you know, you're talking to somebody over the weekend or whatever, and somebody says something on the line, or your mate drops something into the WhatsApp group.
Yeah, you call them out.
It's not, well, and it's not easy, right? Like, it's easier to say nothing. It's not easy to turn around to your man and go, here, would you mind packing that in? Because what you're doing is you're opening yourself up to, like, possibility of a bit of physicality there, depending on the outlook of that person.
Yeah. I mean, you would hope at that stage that the force of the silent majority become less silent and are like, hang on a second, you can't be doing that. Yeah. Anyway, look, tell us your stories. We should point out that the Telegraph, the Telegraph, I'd say, is one of the most well-read papers amongst the rugby fraternity in Ireland. They're going to be very embarrassed. They're going to be choking on their... What do you have for breakfast, Adrian?
Porridge.
Caviar.
No.
Absolutely, every morning, Ger.
Well, no, that's the breakfast of champions,
Black
obviously.
seed.
So how do you posh up your porridge?
Flaxseed.
Posh
Flax up
porridge,
your
right. Who cares about women's rugby? Irish crisis exposed. This is super embarrassing for the IRFU and for everybody involved in rugby in Ireland at an administrative level, and it's embarrassing for the players who are going to represent Ireland in the Six Nations this weekend. While men's national team are riding high, their female counterparts feel ignored by Union's old boys club. This is a story by Fiona Thomas. Just a few quick bullet points on this. Following a wide-ranging investigation, it can now be reported that at a dinner in Dublin last month, a prominent figure in Irish rugby said, "Who gives a fuck about women's rugby?" during a speech made by the IRFU president. I apologise for the language, but it was what was said. There have been horror stories around team selection with players being missed off emails or not even told they've been dropped ahead of a match. Players were refused protein supplements in the build-up to the team's tour of Japan last year. Players were not properly consulted about the IRFU's decision to change the colour of the team's shorts from white to navy blue because of period concerns, and the IRFU refused to explore the option of hybrid contracts, instead favouring a full-time or nothing attitude. Now, they have got some comments from the IRFU in response to this. They are saying that they dispute the claim about the change of shorts, that one of the players had said it was nothing more than a PR stunt. Some of the squad only learned of the news on Instagram. The IRFU says that this was first identified by players during the tour of Japan when they were informed the colour change was going to happen. And then also the IRFU said that it had no recent evidence of players being missed off selection emails, and that it had specific policies in place for informing players about team selection. You're parsing the language. No recent evidence. What does recent mean? Is it this week, last week, this tournament? How recent are we talking about from the IRFU's perspective? And then in terms of the contracts, the IRFU told the Telegraph it had consulted heavily with players before it unveiled full-time contracts last year, and that it had acted upon specific requests from players. The team's contract model, it added, was constantly under review. But John Cronin, who you should follow John Cronin on Twitter if you have any interest in women's rugby or rugby in Ireland. He's the director of rugby at Railway Union RFC, and he says an old boys culture tends to pervade the organisation that can be quite hostile to women's rugby. Women's rugby has come along, but the governance hasn't evolved. The RFU says such claims are objectively untrue. It's investing millions in the development of the women's game at both the professional and community level. We've seen consistent growth and participation of women and girls, testament to the work going on across the country to attract more females to the game. They have a dedicated women's committee and women's advisory group who are tasked with overseeing the growth of participation by women and girls in the game. And it has recently appointed a head of equity, diversity and inclusion. So, yeah. The IRFU subcommittee for women's rugby involved members being appointed rather than voted onto it. There's no single representatives from any of the 10 clubs from the women's AIL. So that's just massively embarrassing. And I presume the sponsors Aon of the women's team are less than happy about who cares about women's rugby. Irish crisis exposed headline. So, will there be any? Will this story take off? Will the rest of the rugby journalists take this story up? It'll be very interesting to see over the next 24 hours.
Well, we've just been talking about a culture where something is said that's not right, and a fellow supporter or a colleague or whatever turns around and says, "Listen, what are you saying that for?" That is the thing that drives the culture, and I think it's totally appropriate here. Like, to use the hackneyed phrase, the RFU are clearly, as they have pointed out themselves, on a bit of a journey from a poor place into a better place, and they clearly still have a bit of a journey to go on. And I think that, like, obviously they're quoting chapter and verse around the policies that they've brought in, or the new processes, or the better facilities, or better terms and conditions for the women's players, and the investment that's there. So those things can coexist, obviously, in any company with a cohort that have still got a poor attitude. So, like, you think you have to take the article on its merits, and the statement has come out. As you say, I'm sure the sponsors will be interested to hear a little bit more than that, and it would be nice to see them to see the RFU go a bit of a step further, and are they internally sort of asking around anybody here? Because it might be legitimate that nobody heard that.
It might be. So the exact details are at a president's dinner attended by around 200 people last month. IRFU President John Robinson gave an address during which he referred to the progress the union has made with the women's team after the rollout of full-time contracts last year, to which a prominent figure in the Irish game said, "Who gives a fuck about women's rugby?" Again, pardon my French. Robinson was not within earshot of the comment, but obviously somebody heard it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it wouldn't be reported.
I mean, somebody within the RFU, and like, but you know, if it was in most companies, you'd feel that people are sort of the next day or whenever this emerges. Did anybody hear that? Does anybody know who did that?
Yeah.
Anybody said that? That's the bit that actually properly addresses the culture.
The thing about players not being told or informed by email of their non-selection that's pretty bad if true. The IRFU saying it has, quote, no recent evidence.
So obviously it did happen before that.
Well, that's what I'm taking from that phrase, but certainly that's a massive issue.
Right. Yeah, and look, the coaching ticket are due to obviously announce the team and do press conference stuff later today, so you would expect that this is going to come up. Greg McWilliams doing a presser later today to announce the squad, so no doubt he will be asked about this. And
it's an awful position to be in, because
but or it's a good opportunity to be an agent for change, you know. Yeah, if that happened, that's disgusting, and I'm going to stand for my team and I'm going to stand for my players. And actually, here's the truth of I've consulted with the players today, and I've asked them about the change of shorts, and here's what the current team are saying. And sure, some people are unhappy with that, but we can't keep everybody happy. There's a way to navigate this that is like, ask me anything, and we will do our absolute best to answer that. Or there's another way to answer it, which is like, no questions on that. Questions about the team selection today, and that's it. So we shall see. Noel Cal says, I'd bring back the interprovincials but make a full weekend festival of it in Croke Park. The whole notion of the All-Ireland final weekend festival is something that Christy O'Connor has been writing about for, I'd say, the best part of a decade. And you kind of still feel like, especially last year when the minor wasn't on beforehand, there was kind of a sense of like there's something missing. And I still don't think they've got the Jubilee thing fully right. Like, that should be a much bigger hoo-ha. I still think that like they could turn, like, who's performing at the All-Ireland final could be a bigger deal than, you know, or somebody screaming into a microphone and a bit of Kaylee dancing in the background.
Half time, yeah.
Or like pre-match now, there's an opportunity to do stuff to get people into the stadium and like have a sense of occasion, as opposed to, right, it's 70 minutes and that's it.
We should have why don't we have flyovers at Croke Park? Why don't we just Super Bowl the hell out of it for the All-Ireland finals?
Well, we've spent all our money on Joe Biden. Shane,
and black and tans.
That budget is empty.
Of course, yeah.
GAA supporter culture was good, the experience in stadiums was good, but over the last 10 years the entire culture of GAA changed, and stadium experience is too influenced by US sports with loud music, etc. I mean, I don't think the loud music is influencing people, abusing people. Like, it's not giving them cover to be assholes, is it?
Definitely not.
Spurs should go for Luis Enrique, says John Claffey. Shane, what happened to this great young Monaghan team you were raving about last night? Up, down, says Lorky.
Yeah,
what happened? The under 20s get beaten?
Down, beat Monaghan in the semi-final. Yeah, Monaghan had good wins against was it Cavan and Armagh in the under 20s this year so far. But the down team is brilliant, by the way.
So they go through anyway, Monaghan. Is it a round robin system?
Not sure at the 20s.
It is in Leinster. It's like you play 3 games and then the 4 teams that are left go into a semi-final.
But I'm glad Lorcan's written to me this morning. But that's a serious down team.
We should just take a moment to mention that Sligo beat Mayo last night in the under 20s, and it's not the first time that's happened. I think it's the second year in a row. And whatever they've done in Sligo underage GAA, and whatever they're doing in Sligo Gaelic football in particular, it's rising quickly. And that's a Mayo under 20 team that had players who could have influenced the outcome of the senior team's defeat at the weekend. We'll talk about that with DB in about 20 minutes time. So that's an absolutely massive win for them, and plenty of reason to pay attention to that championship.